I stood there, the cold steel of my walker pressing into the tile beneath me, as the laughter from across the table bounced off the walls. The scent of over-buttered rolls and rosemary chicken still lingered in the air, but it couldn't mask the sting of my son's words. "Walker chic," he'd said, mocking me. After raising him, after all the years of sacrifice, after being there for him when no one else was, this was how they saw me. A joke, a stranger. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The wheels hummed softly over the hardwood floor as Martha Doyle guided the polished steel frame into her son's dining room. The smell of rosemary chicken and over-buttered rolls filled the air, but conversation cut short as soon as the walker clinked against the threshold. Every pair of eyes pivoted to her. She straightened her shoulders, pushing down the twinge in her knee and lifting her chin higher, refusing to shrink just because she had to lean on something with wheels. Kevin's smirk was instant, sharp as a match flame. "Did you get that off eBay?" His voice carried across the table, dripping with casual cruelty disguised as humor. Rachel didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Kevin, don't be mean. We should bubble wrap the walls instead. Can't have Mom knocking over the china cabinet." She chuckled, tossing her perfect hair back, her gold bracelet flashing under the chandelier light. Emily, perched uncomfortably between her parents, lowered her gaze. She pushed her piece across her plate with the edge of her fork, cheeks warming with embarrassment. Not for her grandmother, but for the people who raised her. Martha made no reply. She set her walker at the head of the table, the legs squeaking faintly as rubber grips stuck to the tile. She adjusted her napkin carefully across her lap, lips pressed into a thin, stone-like line. To anyone else she might have looked fragile, but her silence was heavy, purposeful. Across the table, Doris Green, the only reason Martha had agreed to this charade of a dinner, caught her eye. The older woman tilted her phone just enough for Martha to see the glowing screen. A message popped up in bold letters. "Write this down." Martha's gaze lingered on the text before she looked back to her plate. She didn't need the reminder, but Doris was right. Every jab, every smirk, every careless word, they weren't just insults. They were evidence. The clink of silverware and the scrape of chairs filled the silence left in Martha's wake. Rachel launched into a story about a neighbor's new car. Kevin interrupted to brag about a deal he had lined up for a piece of property in town. Doris chimed in here and there, her sharp wit bouncing back Rachel's smugness. But Martha stayed quiet, methodically cutting into her chicken. The meat was dry, crumbly between her teeth. She chewed without tasting. Halfway through the meal, Kevin leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, watching his mother with a look that made Doris narrow her eyes. "Mom, I've got to say, you're adjusting well," he said, grin curling at the corners. "Pretty soon you'll be racing folks down at the senior center." Rachel laughed too loudly. "Maybe she already has. Slow and steady wins the race, right?" The sound dug into Martha's ears, jagged and relentless. She shifted her walker closer, her fingers tightening around the padded grip until her knuckles paled. Emily's fork clattered softly against her plate, a small protest drowned out by her mother's giggles. Martha's breath came slow, measured. She would not lash out here. That's what they wanted, a flare of anger, proof she was brittle and out of control. Instead, she sat straighter, letting the steel at her side gleam under the chandelier, silent as a blade. When dessert arrived, Doris's sharp elbow nudged Martha's. The older woman didn't speak, but her eyes sparkled with something between mischief and defiance. Martha dipped her spoon into the custard and tasted sugar on her tongue. Not sweetness, but strategy. The table buzzed with idle chatter, laughter about nothing, the kind that made Martha feel like a stranger in her own family. She looked across the spread. Kevin's casual arrogance, Rachel's glittering disdain, Emily's quiet guilt, Doris's steady presence. The air felt tight, buzzing with unspoken battles. Then Kevin stood. His chair scraped against the tile, sharp enough to still the room. He lifted his wineglass high, smirk never wavering. "A toast," he announced, voice ringing with theatrical charm. His eyes locked on Martha as he raised the glass higher. "To Mom, our fragile retiree." The headlights of Kevin's SUV had barely disappeared down the block when Martha shut her own front door with a quiet, deliberate click. The house smelled faintly of lavender polish and old books, a comfort after the sharp cologne and perfume that had clung to her son and daughter-in-law at dinner. She slipped her walker against the side table, removed her cardigan, and set her leather-bound planner on the desk beneath the soft glow of a brass lamp. Her hand trembled only slightly as she uncapped her pen. Not from weakness, she was tired, yes, but not broken. Tonight had given her fuel. She flipped open to the blank page marked with today's date and began to write. April 14th, Kevin. "Did you get that off eBay?" Rachel. "Bubble wrap the walls." Kevin. "To Mom, our fragile retiree." She paused, listening to the scratch of her pen. Each word felt like a nail hammered into a frame she was quietly building. A frame that would soon hold the truth. The phone on the desk buzzed. A message from Doris lit the screen. "Start the file. Don't stop." Martha smiled faintly, her lips tight. She had already started, but she let Doris's insistence push her further. She underlined the final word, retiree, twice, then set down her pen. Her planner, once filled with book club notes and grocery lists, was now turning into something sharper. She leaned back in her chair and inhaled deeply, the scent of paper and ink soothing her nerves. From outside came the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the rustle of a breeze against the leaves. Her house was quiet, hers alone, yet the echoes of her son's laughter still rang in her ears. On her way to the kitchen, she noticed a folded slip of paper sticking out from her purse. Curious, she pulled it free. Her breath caught at the familiar handwriting, loopy, half-formed letters of a teenager rushing before anyone could see. "I'm sorry, Grandma." The words were small but heavy, pressed into the page so hard the ink had bled. Emily's silent rebellion. Martha folded it carefully and carried it back to her desk. Without hesitation, she opened a manila folder she'd labeled in neat, blocky handwriting, Records. She slid the note inside, tucking it between her planner pages and a printout of her Social Security statement. Proof of kindness deserved to be preserved alongside proof of cruelty. For a moment, Martha simply sat, staring at the folder. A thin smile tugged at her lips. This wasn't just documentation, it was armor. Her phone buzzed again, but this time with a different alert. She picked it up and saw a notification glowing on the screen. A new post from Rachel. Against her better judgment, Martha tapped. The photo loaded slowly, the screen flickering in the dim light. And there it was. A candid snapshot Doris must have snapped earlier, of Martha maneuvering her walker past the dining room table. Rachel had written the caption in bold, airy letters. Walker chic. Martha's stomach tightened. The image wasn't cruel in itself. It was the tone, the mocking wink of the caption, the thread of comments already popping below it, laughing emojis, a "so cute" from one of Rachel's friends, and a smattering of digital snickers that made the air around Martha feel colder. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. Instead, she closed the app, set the phone face down, and reached again for her pen. She scribbled a single line in her planner under tonight's notes. Rachel, photo posted. Caption, Walker chic. Then she slid the planner into the folder, sealed it with a clip, and placed the whole stack in the bottom drawer of her desk. Locked it with a key. The lock clicked just as her phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. A sharp electronic chime. She sighed, expecting another mocking update, but froze when she saw the words glowing against the dark. Bank alert. New charge, $389. Electronics World, Modesto. Card ending in 2441. Her card. Her hand tightened on the walker's handle until her knuckles ached. Kevin's smirk from dinner flashed before her eyes. This wasn't just laughter anymore. It was theft. Written in numbers she hadn't authorized. She hadn't stepped foot in that store in years. She shut her planner, slid her glasses onto the desk, and dialed the bank. The representative's polite but detached tone made the theft feel even colder. "Yes, Mrs. Doyle, that transaction was processed at 6:42 p.m. today. Do you authorize this purchase?" Her voice was crisp. "Number Y do not." By the time the fraudulent card was frozen, her tea had gone cold, a filmy skin of cream floating at the top. She sat at the table long after, staring at the steamless cup, the word fraud rolling like thunder in her chest. Morning light streamed across the kitchen. Tile when the knock came, Kevin's rhythm, heavy and entitled. Martha steadied her walker and opened the door. He stepped inside without waiting, holding a white plastic bag stamped Electronics World. His grin was rehearsed, not remorseful. "Mom, don't freak out," he started, lifting the box inside the bag like a trophy. "I was picking up a tablet for Emily. You'll benefit too. She can help you look up recipes, check your emails, all that. I figured it's practically for you." The gall in his voice was worse than the theft. Martha folded her arms over her cardigan, eyes sharp as glass. "You used my card," Kevin chuckled, shaking his head as though she were being unreasonable. "Oh, come on, we're family. It's all going the same direction anyway. Don't act like I drained your savings." From the hallway came the sound of soft footsteps. Emily emerged, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She glanced at the tablet box, confusion flickering across her face. "I didn't ask for one." The room tilted in its silence. Martha let the words hang, savoring how they cut through Kevin's excuses. His smirk faltered, just briefly. He cleared his throat, set the bag down with exaggerated care, and changed the subject. "Look, don't make a big deal out of this. I'll pay you back." Martha stepped forward, her walker's rubber tips squeaking against the tile. "You won't," she said flatly, "because I've already frozen the card." Kevin blinked, unprepared for her swiftness. The silence stretched until Emily whispered, "Good." Her son's mouth hardened into a thin line. His eyes darted from his mother to his daughter, then back again. "You're overreacting. It was one purchase." Martha turned away, unwilling to debate what theft meant in her own home. Her phone buzzed just then, a text from Doris. She read it without hiding the screen. "Enough. Get a lawyer." Martha didn't respond, but her grip on the walker tightened. Kevin didn't need to know the message. He could read it in her expression, the end of indulgence, the closing of a door. That afternoon, Martha made the call. The receptionist at Samuel Hart's office spoke with calm efficiency, scheduling her for the very next morning. "Bring any documentation you have," the woman said. Martha looked at the locked drawer where her folder waited, the edges of Emily's note peeking between the papers. "Oh, I have plenty." Dinner that evening was a quiet affair, just Martha and Doris at the kitchen table. The stew was rich with thyme, steam fogging Martha's glasses as she lifted a spoonful. Doris, never one to soften words, laid her fork down. "This isn't just about money, honey. It's about control. He thinks because you lean on that walker, he can lean on you. But you've got the balance he never will. Don't let him take another inch." Martha nodded, lips pressing tight. She didn't need convincing anymore. The next morning, she adjusted her scarf, slid her notes into a neat stack, and prepared to meet the man who would help her rewrite the ground Kevin stood on. But before she could step out, her front door rattled again. Kevin stormed in, face red, voice booming with a fury that had been stewing overnight. "You can't cut me out." His shout reverberated against the walls. Spit flecked his lips, and his eyes burned with a child's tantrum trapped in a man's body. He jabbed a finger at her chest, each word louder than the last. "I'm your son." The glass door to Samuel Hart's law office was heavy, its brass handle cool beneath Martha's palm. She steadied herself, adjusted her walker's rubber tips on the tiled entryway, and pushed forward. The faint scent of lemon polish and old paper greeted her, a library's cousin, and it steadied her nerves. Doris walked beside her, her stride brisk, cane tapping as punctuation. Remember, she murmured, lowering her voice. He's not here to coddle you. He's here to sharpen you. Let him. Martha gave a curt nod. Her heart thudded like a metronome, part fear, part anticipation. Behind the reception desk sat a young assistant who smiled politely, not pitying, simply efficient. Mrs. Doyle, Mr. Hart will see you now. The office was smaller than Martha expected. Warm light pooling across shelves stacked with thick law books. A faint trace of pipe tobacco lingered, though the man behind the desk had nothing in his hands but a fountain pen. Samuel Hart rose when she entered, tall but unassuming, his tie slightly loosened as if formality was an afterthought. "Martha Doyle?" he asked, voice steady, measured. "Yes." Her grip on the walker tightened as she moved toward the chair opposite his desk. Samuel didn't rush to help her. He simply waited, letting her claim the seat on her own. That absence of fuss felt like a gift. When she settled, Doris slipped into the chair beside her. Samuel leaned forward, fingers tented. "Tell me why you're here," Martha inhaled. The words caught at first, but she pushed through, steady as she had the night before when she'd written her notes. "My son and his wife mock me. In my own home, at my own table. They laugh at this walker as if it's a prop in a comedy." She let the sentence hang, the bitterness in it sharp enough to sting. Then she continued, lower. "And now he's taken money. $389. Charged to my account without permission." Samuel's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed calm. "That is textbook financial exploitation, especially when paired with verbal degradation." He reached for a legal pad and began to write in looping strokes. "Do you have documentation?" Martha slid the manila folder across his desk. Its weight was more than paper, it was proof. She opened the clasp and laid out pages. The planner entry, the bank alert, the printout of Rachel's cruel photo post, and finally, Emily's small handwritten apology. Samuel read silently, his brow furrowed. At last he looked up, eyes sharp. "You're sharper than they think you are. This is thorough." Heat rose to Martha's cheeks, not from embarrassment but from vindication. She folded her hands, letting the walker stand quietly at her side, no longer feeling like a weakness. Doris leaned back, grinning. "Told you, Martha. That walker isn't weakness. It's the thing that brought you here. Right on time." Samuel gave the faintest smile before his expression hardened again. "They think you're fragile. That assumption is their blind spot. We'll use it." Martha tilted her head. "How?" He tapped the papers with his pen. "Your estate, your accounts. Everything they assume will fall into their laps someday. We change it. Legally, permanently." The words struck like church bells in her chest. She'd considered it, yes, in the late-night quiet when Kevin's laugh echoed too loud in her mind. But hearing it from a lawyer's mouth gave the thought shape, spine, legitimacy. Samuel rose, crossing to a locked cabinet, retrieving a leather-bound binder embossed with gold lettering. He set it down with a heavy thump. "We don't wait for their next move. We make ours. Every insult, every stolen cent, every careless word, it all adds up to this moment." Martha ran her fingertips over the binder's surface. She could almost hear Kevin's scoff, Rachel's mocking tone, and feel Emily's trembling note tucked inside her pocket. All of it converged here, on this polished desk, in a quiet office that smelled of lemon and smoke. Samuel leaned closer, lowering his voice, each word deliberate. "We rewrite everything, tonight." The leather binder lay open across Samuel Hart's desk, its thick pages smelling faintly of ink and weighty permanence. Martha leaned forward, her pen poised above the first line, her pulse steadying with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Outside, the Modesto afternoon baked the street in heat, cicadas humming faintly against the window, but in this office the air was cool, deliberate, hushed. Samuel tapped the clause with his pen. "This is where you decide who benefits. You said your son expects everything?" "Assumes it," Martha corrected, her voice cutting. like it's already his. Doris, seated beside her, gave a low chuckle. Not after today. Martha's pen touched paper. She wrote one name clearly, then crossed it out with equal clarity. Kevin Doyle. And then again, Rachel Doyle. She didn't pause. She didn't hesitate. Every stroke of ink carved away entitlement like a surgeon's blade. For Emily, Martha said firmly, everything passes to her. Samuel nodded. We'll place it in a trust, accessible at 25. That way, her parents cannot reach it. The word cannot steadied Martha's breath. She thought of Emily's shy apology note tucked in her folder, the way her granddaughter's eyes had brimmed with shame at that dinner table. Emily was not to be punished for her parents' greed. I want conditions, Martha added, eyes sharpening. College tuition or housing. Something she builds, not squanders. Samuel's pen moved across the draft with brisk strokes. Then it shall be so. If she doesn't use it toward those, she forfeits. Doris leaned in, her bracelets jingling. That's how you walk circles around them, Martha. They laughed at your steps. Now you control every one of theirs. Martha allowed herself the faintest smile. She wasn't only defending herself. She was shaping the future. When the trust terms were set, Samuel turned to the final pages. There's also charitable distribution. Many clients prefer to honor their legacy beyond family. Did you have a cause in mind? Her thoughts drifted to the quiet stacks of the library where she had spent 40 years of her life, binding torn spines with care, guiding lost readers to their books. The smell of paper dust and polished wood still lived in her memory. The library fund, she said softly. Modesto, public. Enough to keep the reading room lights on. People should always have a place to go when the world feels too loud. Samuel nodded approvingly. A worthy legacy. The notary arrived shortly after, brisk and efficient, the stamp pressing down with a finality that made Martha's spine tingle. She signed each page carefully, her signature steady, not trembling, not weak. Samuel sealed the binder, closed it with a decisive snap, and slid it across the desk to her. It's airtight, he assured her. No contest clause. If Kevin or Rachel challenge this, they lose everything. They'll get nothing but the satisfaction of trying. Doris clapped her hands once. Let's see them laugh at that. For the first time in weeks, Martha's chest felt lighter. She rose slowly, gripping the walker, and caught her reflection in the darkened window pane. She no longer saw a woman with failing knees. She saw someone who had just rewritten the future. That night, the house was quiet again, shadows stretching long across her living room. She made tea, steady hands pouring hot water, steam curling into the cool air. She placed the locked folder back into her drawer, but this time, the weight inside it felt less like armor and more like triumph. She had taken her first real step forward. The phone buzzed on her kitchen counter, vibrating against the laminate. Martha expected a message from Doris, maybe a cheer, but the screen showed something colder. Bank alert, failed transaction, joint savings withdrawal attempt, $2,000. Her breath stilled. She read it again. Kevin had tried to dip his hand into her account, but the attempt had been blocked. Martha set the phone down slowly, her lips curling into something sharp and unshaken. The game had begun, and he had already lost his first move. The next morning, Martha stepped into the air-conditioned hush of Valley Central Credit Union. The automatic doors whispered open as though bowing to her determination. She moved forward, the wheels of her walker gliding over the polished floor. To the casual eye, she might have looked slow, tentative. But her eyes were fixed, sharp as a hawk's. Behind the counter, a young teller in a navy blazer smiled politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Doyle. How can we help you today?" Martha slid her ID across the counter. "I need to open a private account, immediately. All my deposits will be rerouted." The teller blinked, then typed rapidly into his keyboard. "Of course. Do you want to keep your joint accounts active?" "No," Martha said. "Close them, every card, every link, permanently. The weight of the words filled the air like a gavel strike. She signed documents with crisp strokes, her pen leaving no hesitation behind. The smell of fresh toner drifted from the printer as new forms slid out, official and final. She tucked them into her leather purse, her fingers brushing over the folder already brimming with notes, receipts, and Emily's hidden apology. By the time she stepped back outside, the Modesto sun hit her face like a spotlight. The air smelled of asphalt and cut grass from a nearby landscaper's truck. She had done it. Kevin's grasp on her accounts had been severed, the cord cut clean. That evening, the knock came, heavy, impatient. Kevin. He barged into her kitchen, Rachel on his heels, perfume clouding the air like an unwanted fog. Kevin's face was tight, color high. "Why are you cutting me off?" Martha stood her ground, one hand resting lightly on her walker's handle, the other steadying her mug of tea. "Because you already did." For a moment, silence. His mouth opened, then shut. Rachel stepped forward, her heels clicking against the tile like the snap of teeth. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're acting paranoid. You're senile, that's what you are." Her manicured hand gestured sharply toward the walker. "Look at you, barely standing." Martha's eyes didn't waver. She sipped her tea. The jasmine steam rose between them, fragrant and calm, in sharp contrast to Rachel's venom. Kevin shifted uneasily, glancing at Rachel, then at his mother. For once, he seemed less certain, his usual bravado dulled. "You're overreacting," he muttered, though the words carried no conviction. Doris, who had slipped into the kitchen through the back door with the timing of an ally on cue, leaned against the counter. "Funny," she said, folding her arms. "A woman who can document every insult, every dollar, and walk herself down to the bank to close your trough. Doesn't sound senile to me." Rachel spun on her. "No one asked you. No one needed to," Doris shot back. "I'm here anyway." The tension vibrated in the air, sharp as glass. Martha remained silent, letting their voices clash around her like storm winds. She knew the storm wasn't over. It was only changing shape. Later that night, the house was finally still. Emily sat on the couch, textbooks spread around her, headphones dangling from her ears without music. She thought no one could hear her parents' earlier shouting match, but the walls carried every word. Her phone buzzed with a notification, her mother's voice drifting from the other room, muffled but clear enough as she spoke to Kevin. "If she keeps this up, we'll file. Incompetence. We'll tell the court she can't manage for herself. With that walker, it won't be hard to prove." Emily froze, heart pounding. She clutched her phone tighter, the edges biting into her palm. Her eyes flicked toward her grandmother's closed door down the hall. They thought Martha was weak. They thought paperwork and whispers would undo her. But Emily knew something they didn't. Her grandmother was already 3 steps ahead. Martha Doyle sat in the bright white of Dr. Harrington's office, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed on her nerves, but she held her spine, straight and her gaze steady. A clipboard rested on her lap, filled with questions that probed her memory, her judgment, her clarity. "Name, date, current president?" the nurse asked, pen poised. Martha's lips curved slightly. "Martha Ann Doyle, April 17th, 2023, and Joseph Biden." Her tone was crisp, unhesitating. The nurse nodded, jotting notes. Dr. Harrington, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, leaned forward. "Mrs. Doyle, your son has raised concerns about your independence. I need to ask, do you feel capable of living on your own, managing your own affairs?" Martha lifted her chin. "I've lived alone for 15 years. My bills are paid on time. My pantry is stocked. My walker doesn't stop me from balancing a checkbook." The doctor studied her for a long moment before scribbling quickly. Later, she ran through coordination tests, touching her nose, following a light with her eyes. Martha performed each without falter. When it ended, Harrington removed his glasses and offered the paper with finality. "Fit, alert, independent. There is no evidence of incompetence here." The relief wasn't surprise. It was validation. Martha folded the document carefully, sliding it into her folder beside the bank records and mocking posts. Another nail in Kevin's coffin. The following week, she entered the probate court. The ceiling fans stirred the heavy air, dust motes catching the light. Wooden benches creaked as townsfolk shifted, curious to see the drama. Doris sat beside Martha, whispering, "Smile. Let them see steel, not fear." At the front, Samuel Hart adjusted his tie, unbothered, radiating calm control. Kevin, however, looked restless, his jaw grinding, Rachel whispering furiously at his side. Emily sat behind them, hands folded tight, her eyes darting toward her grandmother every few seconds. The judge, a stout woman with a firm voice, called the case. Samuel rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we present comprehensive medical and psychological evaluations, declaring Mrs. Doyle fully capable of managing her affairs. She is not only competent but exceptionally organized. Exhibit A." He handed the papers forward. The judge scanned them, expression unreadable. Kevin shot up from his chair, hands slamming on the table. "She forgets things all the time," his voice cracked with desperation. "She's 71. She's weak. She doesn't even drive anymore." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The judge silenced them with a gavel rap. "Do you have documented evidence, Mr. Doyle?" Kevin hesitated, glancing at Rachel. Rachel's lips tightened into a thin line. He had nothing. Doris couldn't resist. She leaned toward Kevin, her voice carrying just enough. "She remembers every cent you stole, though." A ripple of chuckles traveled through the benches. Kevin flushed crimson. The judge's eyes cut through the noise. "Without evidence, this court accepts the medical assessment. Petition for guardianship is denied." The gavel fell, sharp as a blade. Relief swept over Martha in a quiet wave. She turned to Emily, who rose from her bench and wrapped her arms tightly around her grandmother. Emily's voice trembled with emotion. "I knew you'd win." Martha patted her back gently, her own throat tight. This wasn't just survival. It was proof that she was not the frail woman they painted her to be. As the crowd thinned and papers were gathered, Rachel leaned close, her perfume stinging the air. Her whisper was venom against Martha's ear. "You won today, but we'll make you slip up. One mistake, and the court will see what you really are." The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, ordinary in color but stamped with bold red letters. "Returned. Fraudulent application." Martha frowned as she slid it open, the paper crackling in her hands. Inside was a denial notice from a credit card company. Her name and address were listed at the top, but the application details didn't match her writing nor her signature. She didn't need to guess. Kevin. The notice spelled it out. An attempt to open a line of credit using her address, flagged as suspicious. The letter smelled faintly of printer ink, cold and impersonal, yet it carried all the evidence she needed. That afternoon, she slid the letter across Samuel Hart's desk. He read it once, jaw tightening. "He's sloppy," Samuel said, "and he just handed us a gift." He slipped the notice into the growing folder, the papers now thick with Kevin's greed. Martha's fingers brushed the edge of the folder. "Every laugh builds my case," she murmured. Doris, perched on the corner of the office sofa with a smirk, tapped her cane against the floor. "Honey, your walker's the least shaky thing in this family." The words settled over Martha like armor. She wasn't stumbling anymore. They were. Later that evening, Emily arrived at her grandmother's house, laptop in hand. She looked pale, nervous, her eyes darting toward the street as if she feared her parents had followed. "Grandma, I need to show you something." They sat at the dining table, the warm smell of stew rising from the slow cooker. Emily opened her laptop, fingers trembling as she scrolled through Rachel's social media feed. Post after post appeared. Rachel mocking Martha's walker, photos snapped without permission, captions laced with sarcasm. "Senior runway ready," Emily read aloud, her voice bitter. "Grandma's got wheels, watch out." She shut the laptop hard, her face flushed. I printed them. All of them. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a stack of papers, the ink still fresh. Martha flipped through them slowly, the glossy images cruel in their clarity. Her chest tightened, not from humiliation, but from the weapon they had unknowingly handed her. She placed the stack carefully into her records folder, alongside the fraudulent credit denial. "Thank you," Martha said softly, meeting Emily's eyes. "You're braver than they'll ever be." Emily's throat bobbed. I can't keep pretending. Mom thinks it's funny. Dad doesn't even see you as a person anymore, but I do." She blinked back sudden tears. "I don't want to lose you." Martha reached across the table, her hand warm over Emily's. "You won't." For a moment, the only sounds were the slow bubbling of the stew and the ticking of the wall clock. The house felt safe, a pocket of stillness in the storm that brewed outside. But safety never lasted long. 2 days later, Martha returned from her physical therapy session to find another envelope waiting, thicker this time, stamped with Superior Court of California, County of Stanislaus. Her heart tightened as she opened it. The words leapt off the page. Petition for guardianship of Martha Doyle, filed by Kevin Doyle. Her knees felt cold despite the late afternoon heat pressing against the windows. She lowered herself into her armchair, the paper trembling between her fingers. This wasn't just laughter or stolen money anymore. Kevin wanted control, legal, permanent control. She could almost hear his voice, the sneer in it. "You can't cut me out. I'm your son." Martha exhaled slowly, steadied her grip on the walker at her side, and whispered to the empty room, "Then you've just declared war." The courthouse smelled of varnished oak and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to history and judgment. Martha's walker tapped steadily against the polished floor as she entered the probate courtroom, Samuel Hart by her side. Doris followed close, her cane clacking like a drumbeat of defiance. Emily trailed behind, clutching her backpack to her chest as if bracing herself for battle. At the front of the room sat Judge Alvarez, her robes crisp, her eyes sharper than any gavel. She scanned the case file before her, lips pressing into a thin, unreadable line. Kevin was already at the petitioner's table, shoulders squared, Rachel at his side. His tie was crooked, his cheeks flushed, as if outrage had become his cologne. Rachel leaned close, whispering something that made him nod fiercely. "Case number 2023-419, the clerk announced. NRE, guardianship of Martha Doyle." Martha's breath didn't hitch, not once. She lowered herself into her chair at the respondent's table, her folder resting on her lap like a shield. Judge Alvarez looked up. "Mr. Doyle, you've petitioned to assume guardianship of your mother. Please state your grounds." Kevin stood abruptly, chair legs screeching against the floor. "She can't live alone. She forgets things. She can barely move around the house. She's dependent on that walker. She's vulnerable, Your Honor. She needs me." His voice quavered, righteous on the surface, but hollow underneath. Samuel didn't flinch. He rose with measured calm. "With the court's permission, I'll present evidence to the contrary." The judge gestured. "Proceed." Samuel laid the folder open, spreading papers like a dealer with a winning hand. Exhibit A, full medical and psychological evaluations completed just last week. Results: fit, alert, independent, no impairment. Exhibit B, financial records, including unauthorized charges and attempted fraud by the petitioner. Exhibit C, documented notes, timestamps, and corroborating witness testimony of harassment and exploitation. Each page landed with weight, the sound crisp against the table. The courtroom rustled as spectators leaned in. Judge Alvarez skimmed the documents. Her brow lifting slightly, she turned to Martha. "Mrs. Doyle, do you wish to add anything?" Martha rose slowly, hands resting on her walker. Her voice carried steady, firm. "I've lived on my own for years. I manage my home, my accounts, my life. My son does not protect me. He undermines me. I do not need guardianship. The judge studied her, then returned to Kevin. Your response? Kevin sputtered. She's lying. She forgets everything. Doris, unable to resist, leaned forward from the bench. She remembers every dime you stole, though. A ripple of laughter darted through the gallery before the judge struck her gavel once. Order. Kevin's face reddened. His hands clenched into fists. This isn't fair. She's 71. She's not the same. Enough, Judge Alvarez cut in, her tone final. She glanced again at the papers before slamming the gavel. This court finds Martha Doyle fully capable of managing her affairs. Petition denied. The sound rang like thunder through Martha's chest. Relief surged, quiet but undeniable. She sank back into her chair, Doris slipping her hand over Martha's with a whispered grin. Victory lap, my dear. Kevin, however, exploded. You'll regret this! His shout cracked through the room, venom twisting his face. Rachel tugged at his sleeve, whispering frantically, but he shook her off. The judge's eyes cut through his outburst. Mr. Doyle, your behavior is inappropriate. Furthermore, based on the evidence submitted regarding your financial dealings, this court orders a preliminary investigation into your accounts. If exploitation is found, restitution will follow. The words silenced the room. Kevin's expression faltered, confidence draining like sand through a sieve. Behind him, Emily whispered, almost too softly to hear, "You're the one embarrassing us." Her cheeks burned, but her voice carried far enough for Martha to catch it. The girl's small defiance was a spark, one that warmed Martha far, more than the judge's gavel had. The hearing adjourned with a bang of wood. The crowd shuffled out, voices buzzing with speculation. Kevin stormed toward the exit, Rachel hissing at him under her breath. Martha didn't move right away. She rested her hand on her walker, her chest lifting with a deep, steady breath. Her son had come to claim her life as his possession. Instead, he'd handed her the keys to his downfall. The courthouse air was heavier this time, tinged with the faint tang of coffee and sweat from too many cases stacked back to back. Martha sat in her place at the respondent's table, her hands folded neatly over her folder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Today the papers would speak for her. Samuel's heart rose with the calm of a man who already knew the outcome. He slid a thick binder onto the evidence stand, its spine groaning under the weight of pages. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady but edged with quiet fire. "The petitioner's finances show a pattern not only of irresponsibility, but of exploitation." Kevin shifted in his chair, jaw tight. Rachel fiddled with her phone until the bailiff barked for her to put it away. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Proceed?" Samuel flipped to the first tab. Exhibit A, 3 maxed-out credit cards in Mr. Doyle's name, totaling $47,000 in unpaid balances. He turned the page. Exhibit B, 2 unpaid personal loans, both in default. Exhibit C, failed credit applications, including one attempt fraudulently tied to Mrs. Doyle's address. Murmurs rippled across the gallery benches. Kevin's face flushed, his smirk gone. Samuel didn't pause. He turned another tab, his voice cooling further. Exhibit D, records showing that Mrs. Rachel Doyle withdrew over $12,000 from their daughter Emily Doyle's college savings account within the last year. No repayment, no explanation. The words dropped like stones in water. Emily's head snapped up, eyes wide, her face draining of color. "What?" she whispered, loud enough for the courtroom to catch. Rachel shot her a warning glance, but Emily pressed forward, her voice trembling but strong. "So you laughed at Grandma's walker while stealing from me?" The silence that followed was suffocating. The judge's gaze cut toward Rachel, whose lips parted but found no defense. Doris broke it with a low mutter from behind Martha, her voice carrying just enough. "Cruelty always leaves receipts." The courtroom chuckled softly, then hushed, as the judge raised her gavel. "Order." Samuel closed the binder with a soft thud. "Your Honor, my client has remained silent throughout these proceedings, not because she lacks a defense, but because the documents say what words cannot. Her so-called guardians are the very ones who require oversight. Mrs. Doyle's competence is beyond question. Mr. and Mrs. Doyle's integrity, however, is not. Martha sat perfectly still, her gaze forward, her walker at her side like a sentinel. She didn't glance at Kevin or Rachel. She didn't need to. Their unraveling was visible in the way Kevin's hands shook against the table, the way Rachel's nails tapped nervously against the wood. Too fast, too loud. The judge leaned back, studying both parties. I've reviewed the exhibits. The evidence is clear. This court not only denies guardianship, but issues a restitution order. Mr. Kevin Doyle and Mrs. Rachel Doyle are to repay misappropriated funds, including those taken from their daughter's account, with interest. Kevin bolted upright, his voice cracking. You can't do this. The gavel struck, silencing him. This court can, and it has. The order was final, the echo of wood against wood rolling across the chamber like thunder. Martha's lips curled into the faintest smile as she pressed her folder shut. She had spoken almost nothing, but her silence had been sharper than any of Kevin's shouted words. The debts were no longer hidden. They were carved into record in ink and law, the way Martha had always known they would be. The order came down like a hammer on iron. Kevin Doyle was to repay every dollar siphoned from his mother's accounts, with interest. Beside him, Rachel was fined for her fraudulent withdrawal from Emily's college savings. The words echoed in the courtroom, as binding as chains. Martha didn't move. She sat still in her chair, Walker beside her, lips pressed into a thin, unwavering line. She didn't gloat, didn't sneer. The papers were victory enough. Samuel's voice carried the final blow. Furthermore, Your Honor, my client requests that, should she pass, her estate be protected from further interference. We propose Emily Doyle be named alternate trustee of her grandmother's trust. The judge adjusted her glasses. Granted, Mrs. Doyle's estate remains secure. Miss Emily Doyle is appointed as alternate trustee. Gasps flickered through the gallery benches. Emily's eyes widened, her hands twisting in her lap as if she couldn't quite believe it. She glanced at her grandmother, who gave her only a steady nod, silent reassurance. Kevin, however, erupted. His chair screeched across the tile as he leapt to his feet, fists clenched. His voice shook with fury. You'll regret cutting me off. You'll regret this whole thing. Martha finally turned her head, her eyes cool as winter fog. I already don't. The stillness in her tone landed harder than any shout. Kevin faltered, chest heaving, and for the first time, he had nothing left to say. Rachel hissed under her breath, tugging at his arm, but he shook her off. The couple stood isolated now, no longer powerful, their whispers drowned in the weight of judgment. Outside the courthouse, the dry Modesto air carried the scent of exhaust and hot asphalt. Reporters from the local paper lingered, scribbling notes as families trickled past. Martha adjusted her scarf, steadying her steps with her walker. Doris matched her pace, cane clicking against the sidewalk. You're walking tall now, Doris said, her grin wide. Might have taken that walker to do it, but you've got more backbone than anyone I know. Martha allowed herself a rare smile. Backbone doesn't creak like knees. Doris laughed, her voice sharp and triumphant, echoing down the courthouse steps. Emily rushed up behind them, nearly tripping over her backpack straps. She threw her arms around Martha. Thank you for trusting me, for protecting me. Martha smoothed her granddaughter's hair, inhaling the faint scent of strawberry shampoo. You earned it, Emily. You see clearer than your parents ever will. They walked together to the car, sunlight glaring off windshields, the day unseasonably hot. Behind them, Kevin and Rachel lingered near the courthouse entrance, arguing in sharp whispers. Martha didn't need to hear the words. She could see it in Rachel's face, pinched with disgust, in Kevin's posture, hunched like a man suddenly much smaller. That evening, Martha brewed tea at her kitchen table, the jasmine steam curling through the lamplight. Doris sat across from her, recounting every detail of Kevin's collapse with glee. Emily quietly flipped through a stack of homework, her presence a steady comfort. Then came the sound of footsteps down the hall, sharp and decisive. Rachel emerged from the spare room where she and Kevin had been arguing, a suitcase dragging behind her. The zippers strained as she tugged it shut. "I'm done with this family," she snapped, her voice flat, final. The wheels of the suitcase rattled against the floorboards as she hauled it toward the door. Kevin's stunned voice echoed after her. "Rachel, wait!" But she didn't. The slam of the door rattled Martha's picture frames long after Rachel dragged her suitcase down the steps. The sound of tires crunching gravel faded into silence, leaving Kevin in the middle of Martha's living room, fists balled, face pale. He looked less like a grown man and more like a child left behind in a game he didn't know how to play. Rachel was gone, just like that. For a moment, Kevin stood frozen, staring at the door as if expecting her to return. When she didn't, he muttered something under his breath and stormed out as well. The house fell still again, except for the faint tick of Martha's wall clock and the steady hiss of the kettle warming on the stove. By the next morning, Modesto was buzzing. Doris phoned Martha, her voice crackling with satisfaction. Words out. Rachel bolted, left him with the debts, the fines, and no one to blame but himself. Tables turned, and quick. Martha poured her tea, inhaling the soft scent of chamomile. "Debts," she said calmly, "always collect interest." That evening, the pounding came at her door. Hard, desperate. She opened it to find Kevin on the porch, eyes bloodshot, shirt untucked. His arrogance had drained into something sour. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. "Please, I need help. Rachel's gone, the bills are piling up. I can't." His words collapsed into silence. Martha tightened her grip on her walker, planting it firmly before her. "You've already taken enough." From behind her, Emily appeared, clutching a notebook to her chest. She stepped into the doorway beside her grandmother, her jaw trembling, but her voice steady. "I'm not going home with you." Kevin turned, stunned. "Emily." "No," she cut him off. "You laughed at her. You stole from her. You let Mom drain my college fund. You're not protecting me. You never were." His face fell, eyes widening like a man watching a bridge collapse beneath his feet. For once, Kevin had no retort. Martha placed a hand lightly on Emily's shoulder. "Go on back, sweetheart. I'll handle this." The door closed softly, leaving Kevin on the porch with nothing but the cooling night air and his own debts pressing down like an anvil. The following week, Samuel Hart filed new paperwork with precision. "We'll add Emily's name directly to your guardianship preferences," he explained in his steady tone. "If anything happens, she remains under your legal protection. Kevin can't use her as leverage again." Martha signed the page without hesitation, her pen gliding smoothly. The sound of Samuel's stamp and the rustle of notarized copies were like a hymn of security. "And the savings account?" Martha asked. Samuel nodded, sliding another paper forward. "Filed. Kevin's claim is terminated. Emily's funds are protected. He won't touch a dime." Relief washed over Emily's face when Martha shared the news. The girl hugged her tightly, the smell of shampoo and notebook paper clinging to her. "Thank you," Emily whispered. Martha kissed her hair. "You deserved protecting all along." For a few days, peace seemed to settle. The house smelled of fresh bread and laundry, the air humming with ordinary sounds. Doris clattering dishes after book club. Emily humming softly while studying at the dining table. Martha thought briefly that maybe the storm had passed, but storms rarely end so quietly. On Friday morning, Doris burst through the door, newspaper clutched in hand, her eyes wide with barely contained glee. "Martha," she said, dropping the folded paper on the kitchen table, "you're going to want to see this." Across the front of the Modesto Gazette's community section was the headline, "Local Contractor Fired. After Theft Charges Surface, Kevin Doyle under investigation." Martha traced the bold letters with one finger. her lips curving not into a smile, but into something steadier. This wasn't just collapse, it was reckoning. The idea came to Martha one night while sitting at her desk, the lamplight pooling across her open planner. She stared at the faint crease in Emily's folded apology note, tucked safely into her folder. She thought of Kevin's sneer, Rachel's captions, the laughter that had once cut into her chest like glass. And then she thought of the other faces she saw each week at the community center. Men and women gripping canes, leaning on walkers, bracing themselves against a world too quick to call them fragile. It hit her with the force of inevitability. What they mocked could become her monument. By the following month, Samuel had filed the paperwork. Doris had rallied the church ladies, and the Modesto Gazette ran the headline across its community section. Retiree turns mockery into movement, the Walker Fund. The article showed a photo of Martha, chin lifted, one hand resting lightly on her polished silver walker as Emily stood beside her, holding a stack of donated devices. The fund's mission was clear: provide walkers, canes, and mobility aids to seniors in need, free of stigma, free of shame. At the first distribution event, the air buzzed with the sound of laughter, not cruel this time, but genuine, warm. Seniors tested their new walkers across the strip mall parking lot, the squeak of wheels and the tap of rubber tips creating an unexpected music. Emily darted between them, tightening screws, adjusting handles, showing an older woman how to lock the brakes. Her cheeks glowed pink from the heat and the pride she couldn't quite hide. "Grandma," Emily said, brushing hair from her face, "I think we just gave Mr. Hernandez back his freedom. Look at him go." Martha's heart swelled as she watched the retired farmhand stride a few careful steps, his smile stretching wide enough to erase years of pain etched into his features. Doris, watching from her folding chair, slapped her cane against the pavement like a drum. "Martha Doyle," she crowed, her grin radiant. "You made their laughter useful. You turned it into legs for a whole town." Martha smiled, but her gaze drifted to the crowd's edge, where whispers traveled. Kevin's name had already circulated, his theft charges, his termination from the contracting company, his debts piling like autumn leaves in a gutter. Where once he carried swagger, now he carried disgrace. The Gazette didn't bother shielding his name. His reputation was collapsing, not behind closed doors, but under the sun where everyone could see. And Martha? She wasn't hiding anymore. Later that week, Samuel Hart arrived at her home, his leather satchel heavier than usual. He spread documents across the kitchen table, the scent of ink sharp and final. Emily sat with them, nervous but proud, her pen twirling in her hand. Samuel cleared his throat. "This, Mrs. Doyle, is your final estate document. All notarized, all sealed. The Walker Fund receives its permanent endowment. Emily Doyle is named sole heir to the remainder." He slid the page forward, tapping the signature line. "This estate is unassailable. They can't contest it." Martha signed with a hand steady as stone. The pen glided across the page, each letter sealing decades of labor, love, and resolve. Emily leaned forward, her voice quiet, reverent. "You trusted me with everything." Martha reached across the table, taking her granddaughter's hand. "Because you're the only one who didn't laugh when I walked in the room." For the first time in months, Martha felt her chest loosen fully. No mockery, no courtroom battles, no shadows of doubt. Only legacy, solid, inked, and undeniable. But peace never lingered long. That evening, as Martha folded laundry in the hush of her living room, a sharp thud hit her porch. She opened the door to find a thick envelope on the mat, her name scratched across it in familiar, desperate handwriting. She picked it up slowly, her fingers tracing the jagged scrawl, "Kevin Doyle." The pages trembled faintly in Martha's hands, though not from weakness. Kevin's handwriting sprawled unevenly, blotched in places where ink had bled too heavily, as if desperation had weighed down the pen. She sat at her desk, lamplight spreading across the paper. Her walker parked neatly by her chair like a guard. "Mom, I'm sorry. Please hear me out." She read on. Paragraphs of excuses spilled out. He'd been stressed. He'd made mistakes. He never meant to hurt her. Each sentence bent under the weight of self-pity. Buried between them were pleas. "I need another chance. I'll do better. I can't lose my family." What the letter lacked was acknowledgement. Not one line about the mockery. Not one admission of theft. Not one recognition of the daughter he'd stripped of a college fund. Just excuses that smelled faintly of beer and desperation, even from the page. Martha set the papers down, her expression hardening into stone. She reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out the manila folder, marked in her neat handwriting, "Records." Inside, she kept everything, mocking captions, bank alerts, receipts. Now, with unhurried precision, she slid Kevin's letter into the back, pressing it flat beneath the weight of everything else. Then she wrote a single word across the tab in pen, darker than the rest. "Done." Emily appeared in the doorway, her homework tucked under one arm. She looked at the envelope on the desk, then at her grandmother's face. "Do you forgive him?" she asked softly. Martha closed the drawer with a quiet click. "I don't waste forgiveness." The next day, the Walker Fund held its first official event in the Modesto Community Center. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the hall as tables lined with polished walkers, canes, and brochures stood waiting. Dozens of seniors shuffled in, some leaning on worn-out aids, others clutching arms for support. Martha stood at the front, Emily by her side, Doris grinning in the crowd. Samuel Hart had come too, in his neat suit, standing quietly in the back, watchful. When Martha took the podium, a hush fell. Her voice carried, steady and even. "They laughed when I needed a walker. Today, we laughed together, not in cruelty, but in strength. Every step we take is a step forward, no matter how slow." Applause rolled through the room, warm and thunderous. Seniors tapped their canes against the floor in rhythm, the hollow thud echoing like a drum line of defiance. Emily passed out the first walker, adjusting the handles for a smiling woman who clutched her hand in gratitude. Doris nudged Martha, eyes bright. "Look at this. You've taken every insult they threw at you and turned it into a whole community standing taller. You built something that's going to outlast every nasty word." Martha's eyes swept the room, the grateful faces, the laughter, the clatter of mobility aids hitting polished tile. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt less like survival and more like legacy. The local reporters snapped photos as seniors lined up, eager to try their new walkers. The caption practically wrote itself, "Resilience in Motion." Martha allowed herself a small smile, knowing Kevin's name had already been dragged through these same pages, his theft exposed for all to see. Her story now ran parallel to his, but while his ended in ruin, hers grew into something larger than herself. As the event wrapped up, Martha and Doris gathered at the exit while Emily handed out the last brochures. The afternoon sunlight spilled through the double doors, painting the floor in long golden streaks. The scent of coffee lingered, mingling with the faint tang of dust from the walker's rubber tips. Emily came to Martha's side, sliding her arm through her grandmother's with quiet reverence. Her eyes glowed, not with pity, but with pride. "Let's walk home," Emily said softly. The sun was sliding low over Modesto, spilling gold across the sidewalks, and painting the ranch-style homes in warm light. Martha's walker rolled smoothly over the concrete, its steady rhythm matching her breath. Emily walked at her side, her hand looped gently through her grandmother's arm, their pace slow but certain. For the first time in months, Martha felt no weight pressing on her chest, no court summons, no bank alerts, no mocking laughter echoing from across a dinner table, just the clean air of evening, tinged with the scent of orange blossoms drifting from a neighbor's yard. They turned the corner and stopped. On the side wall of the strip mall, fresh paint gleamed. A mural, stretching wide in brilliant color, it showed figures of every age leaning on walkers and canes, their heads lifted, their steps forward. A Across the top, bold letters read, "The Walker Fund, strength in every step." Martha's breath caught. The artist had painted her likeness too, silver hair, determined eyes, Walker shining like steel in sunlight. Emily stared, awe filling her voice. "Grandma, that's you. Your steps changed everything." Martha reached out, brushing her fingers against the cool brick, the fresh paint still smelling faintly of turpentine. She let the moment sink deep, then answered, steady and sure. Every step was worth it. Behind them, the sound of laughter rose, not cruel this time, but joyful. Doris stood across the street, cane raised high, her voice carrying, "Martha Doyle, you glorious rebel! You walked circles around them." The small crowd gathered at the mural, neighbors, church friends, seniors from the community center, cheered and clapped. Some banged their walkers against the pavement like drums. Others shouted her name. Martha felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't shrink back. She lifted her chin, her walker steady beneath her hands, and allowed their celebration to wash over her. Emily beamed up at her, pride shining in her eyes. "They're not just cheering for the fun," she said. "They're cheering for you." Martha's throat tightened, not with tears but with triumph. She thought of Doris's words, of Samuel's quiet strategy, of Emily's unwavering loyalty, and yes, of Kevin's laughter, Rachel's sneers, the mockery that had once made her heart ache. Those moments had been sharp as glass then, but now they had been ground down into something stronger, into fuel. The mural glowed in the evening light, bold and unignorable, as if it had been waiting there all along for her to arrive. The community surged forward, people shaking her hand, thanking her, telling her how the Walker Fund had already changed lives. The smell of street food from a nearby vendor mingled with the chatter, the sound of clapping echoing against storefronts. Martha felt herself at the center, not of ridicule, but of respect. Doris elbowed her playfully. "Look at you, Martha. You've gone from toast of the dinner table to toast of the whole town." Martha let out a low laugh, one that carried not bitterness but strength. "And this time," she said, "the toast is worth raising." The crowd began to disperse as the sun dipped further, but the warmth lingered. Emily slipped her arm tighter through her grandmother's, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "Let's walk home." Together, they turned away from the mural, the sound of Doris's cheering still trailing behind them. Martha's walker tapped a steady rhythm on the pavement, a beat not of fragility, but of freedom. She looked ahead, the path clear, the air cooling, her granddaughter steady at her side. "They laughed when I got a walker," Martha said, her voice carrying into the evening, firm as a vow. "So I walked straight into the lawyer's office and cut them out forever."